I never should have gone down that well. This is a horror story about what happened at Ashton Farm in Kentucky, 1939, when my curiosity led me to discover something that should have stayed buried forever. My name is Thomas Crawford, and I was 23 years old when I witnessed the most terrifying thing imaginable in the depths of that cursed well. The events I'm about to tell you changed my life forever, leaving scars on my mind that still bleed 40 years later. Every night, I wake up screaming, remembering the sound of scraping claws against wet stone and the smell of something ancient and evil rising from the darkness below. What we found down there defied every law of nature and reason, challenging everything I believed about life and death. The memory haunts me still, a constant reminder that some secrets are better left undisturbed. If you like real horror stories, leave your like on this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. The autumn of 1939 had been particularly harsh in rural Kentucky, with early frost killing most of the tobacco crop and leaving the farming community desperate for work. I had traveled from Louisville to the small town of Millbrook, answering an advertisement for laborists needed at the old Ashton farm. The property had been abandoned for nearly a decade after the mysterious disappearance of the Ashton family, but new owners had recently purchased it with plans to restore the land to productivity. The farmhouse stood like a weathered monument to better times, its white paint peeling and shutters hanging at odd angles. Tall grass and wild vines had reclaimed much of the property, creating an almost jungle-like appearance around the main structures. The other workers and I were housed in a converted barn, sleeping on straw mattresses and eating simple meals cooked over an open fire. Our primary task was to clear the overgrown fields and repair the various outbuildings, but it was the old stone well behind the farmhouse that first caught my attention. Something about it seemed wrong, though I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. The well was covered with heavy wooden planks that appeared much newer than the rest of the farm's fixtures, and strange symbols had been carved into the stone rim. What really bothered me, though, was how the other workers avoided going near it, always finding excuses to work in other areas of the property whenever our foreman assigned tasks near the well. Their nervous glances and whispered conversations only fueled my growing curiosity about what might be hidden beneath those weathered wooden boards. Tell me in the comments what you think those symbols on the well could mean. The morning air carried an unusual chill as I approached the well for a closer examination, my breath forming small clouds in the October darkness. Dawn was still an hour away, but I had awakened early, unable to shake the strange dreams that had plagued my sleep. In those dreams, I heard voices calling from deep underground, speaking in languages I couldn't understand but somehow felt familiar. The grass around the well was different from the rest of the property, stunted and yellowed as if something beneath the ground was poisoning the soil. When I knelt beside the stone rim to examine the carved symbols more closely, the cold seemed to intensify, seeping through my work clothes and settling into my bones. The symbols were unlike anything I had seen before, definitely not the work of local craftsmen. They appeared to be much older than the farm itself, possibly predating European settlement of the area. Some resembled crude animals, while others looked like twisted human figures engaged in acts I preferred not to contemplate. The wood covering the well was secured with heavy iron chains and several large padlocks, far more security than would be needed to simply keep animals from falling in. As I traced one of the symbols with my finger, I could have sworn I felt it pulse with warmth, as if something alive was responding to my touch. The sensation made me jerk my hand back instinctively, and in the sudden silence, I heard something that made my blood run cold. From somewhere deep below, so faint it might have been my imagination, came the sound of scratching against stone. Tell me your city and country so I know where my viewers are watching from around the world. The scratching sound continued intermittently throughout that day, always when I was near the well but stopping whenever other workers came close enough to hear. I began to suspect that whatever was down there was aware of human presence and was trying to communicate specifically with me. During my lunch break, I questioned some of the older workers about the well's history, but their responses were evasive and uncomfortable. Old Pete, who had lived in the area his entire life, finally pulled me aside and warned me to stay away from it. According to local legend, the well had been sealed by the previous owners after several livestock animals had mysteriously died near it, their bodies found drained of blood with strange bite marks on their necks. The Ashton family had reportedly tried to fill the well with concrete, but the material had somehow disappeared overnight, leaving the shaft as deep and empty as before. Pete's weathered face grew pale as he described how the family's youngest son had claimed to see things moving in the darkness below, creatures that shouldn't exist in the natural world. The boy had become increasingly obsessed with the well, spending hours sitting beside it and talking to whatever was down there. One morning, the family found the wooden cover torn apart from the inside, the heavy chains broken as if they were made of paper. The boy was never seen again, and the rest of the family packed up and left that very day, never to return to Kentucky. As Pete finished his story, we both heard it clearly, the sound of something large moving against the stone walls far below our feet. My rational mind tried to dismiss Pete's story as local superstition, but the fear in the old man's eyes was genuine, and the sounds from the well were becoming more frequent and more distinct. That evening, I lay on my straw mattress listening to the other workers snore, but sleep eluded me as my thoughts kept returning to the mysterious shaft. The moonlight streaming through the barn windows cast strange shadows that seemed to move independently, and several times I thought I heard footsteps outside, circling the building with predatory patience. Around midnight, unable to resist any longer, I quietly gathered a rope and lantern and slipped out into the night. The farm was eerily silent, as if every living creature had fled the area, leaving only the whisper of wind through the bare tree branches. As I approached the well, the temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees, and the air took on a thick, oppressive quality that made breathing difficult. The wooden planks covering the well were vibrating slightly, as if something below was pressing against them from underneath. When I placed my ear against the wood, I could hear what sounded like multiple voices speaking in urgent, overlapping whispers. The language was completely foreign, but the tone conveyed desperation and hunger in a way that transcended words. My hand shook as I began to work at the padlocks with a crowbar I had brought from the tool shed, knowing that I was about to cross a line from which there might be no return. The first padlock snapped open with surprising ease, as if it had been weakened by years of whatever force was trapped below. As each restraint fell away, the whispers from the depths grew louder and more agitated, taking on an almost celebratory tone that filled me with dread. The heavy chains slithered to the ground with metallic clanks that seemed to echo across the entire property, and I half expected to see lights appearing in the farmhouse windows as the other workers investigated the noise. But the building remained dark and silent, as if everyone inside was held in an unnatural sleep. With trembling hands, I began to pry up the wooden planks, each one coming away more easily than the last. The smell that rose from the opening was indescribable, a mixture of decay, sulfur, and something else that triggered a primal fear deep in my genetic memory. My lantern's light barely penetrated the first few feet of the shaft, revealing stone walls that were covered with a strange, organic-looking substance that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. The whispers had stopped completely, replaced by an expectant silence that was somehow more terrifying than any sound could have been. As I secured my rope to a nearby fence post and prepared to descend, I caught a glimpse of movement in the darkness below, something pale and segmented that quickly withdrew from my light. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to replace the cover and run, but an overwhelming compulsion drove me forward, as if I was being controlled by some external force that would not be denied. The rope felt slick in my sweating palms as I began my descent into the well, each downward foot revealing new horrors carved into the ancient stone walls. The organic substance I had noticed from above was actually some kind of cocoon-like material, hanging in long strands that brushed against my face and left a sticky residue on my skin. The deeper I went, the warmer the air became, creating an unnatural contrast with the frigid surface temperature. My lantern revealed symbols similar to those on the rim, but these were larger and more elaborate, telling some kind of story that progressed as I descended. The images showed human figures being led or dragged toward a central pit, their faces contorted in expressions of terror and anguish. Below them were depicted creatures that defied description, things with too many limbs and eyes in places where no eyes should be. About 30 feet down, my boots touched something soft and yielding, and when I looked down, I realized I was standing on a pile of bones that had been picked completely clean. The bones were from various animals, but disturbingly, many appeared to be human, including several small skulls that could only have belonged to children. The whispers started again, coming from all directions now, as if the walls themselves were speaking. In the dancing shadows cast by my lantern, I began to see movement in the cocoon-like structures, bulges and protrusions that suggested something alive was developing inside them. My rational mind finally reasserted itself, screaming that I needed to climb back up immediately, but as I turned toward the rope, I discovered it was no longer there. Looking up, I could see the circle of night sky far above, but the rope that had been my lifeline to the surface had vanished completely, leaving me trapped in this nightmare pit with whatever creatures called a home. Panic began to set in as I realized that someone, or something, had deliberately stranded me down here, perhaps as some kind of offering to the things that lived in the darkness. The bone pile shifted beneath my feet, and I heard the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the tunnels that branched off from the main shaft. My lantern flickered ominously, threatening to leave me in complete darkness, and I frantically tried to conserve the oil while still maintaining enough light to see potential threats. The whispers were becoming more distinct now, and I began to recognize individual voices speaking in what sounded like archaic English mixed with other languages I couldn't identify. Some of the voices were calling my name, which was impossible since none of the creatures down here should know who I was. Others were reciting what sounded like incantations or prayers, but the words made my skin crawl with their blasphemous implications. From one of the side tunnels came a wet, sliding sound, like something massive dragging itself across the stone floor. The cocoons around me began to twitch and pulse more rapidly, and I realized with growing horror that my presence had somehow accelerated whatever gestation process was taking place inside them. Cracks began to appear in the nearest cocoon, and something pale and glistening started to emerge, unfurling limbs that bent in directions that violated every law of anatomy I knew. The creature that emerged from the cocoon was a fusion of human and something else entirely. Its pale skin stretched taut over a frame that was too long and jointed in too many places. Where its face should have been was a mass of writhing tentacles surrounding a mouth filled with needle-sharp teeth, and its eyes were scattered across its torso like diseased stars. It moved with a horrible grace, testing each limb as if remembering how to use a body after a long dormancy. When it turned toward me, those scattered eyes focused with an intelligence that was far too human for comfort, and I realized that this thing had once been a person, probably one of the missing locals from years past. More cocoons were splitting open now, releasing a variety of creatures that shared the same basic template of human features horrifically rearranged and augmented with alien appendages. They didn't attack immediately but seemed to be studying me, communicating with each other through a series of clicks and whistles that bypassed human language entirely. The largest of the creatures, something that might have once been an adult man, approached me slowly, its multiple arms ending in hands that had too many fingers. When it spoke, its voice was a harmony of different tones, as if several people were speaking in unison from the same throat. It welcomed me to their community, explaining that I had been chosen to join them in their eternal existence between life and death. The transformation process would be painful, it admitted, but the result would be a form of consciousness that transcended human limitations. As it spoke, the other creatures began to circle me, their movements coordinated like a predatory pack preparing to overwhelm their prey. My lantern chose that moment to flicker and die, plunging the pit into absolute darkness that seemed to have physical weight. In the blackness, I could hear the creatures moving closer, their breathing creating a rhythmic sound like ocean waves breaking against a distant shore. Desperate hands searched through my pockets for anything that could serve as a weapon or tool, finally closing around a small penknife that seemed pathetically inadequate against the supernatural horrors surrounding me. The leader's voice continued in the darkness, explaining how the well served as a gateway between worlds, a place where the barriers between dimensions were thin enough to allow passage for beings that existed in the spaces between reality. The Ashton family had unknowingly built their farm over this crossing point, and their well had tapped directly into the spawning chamber of creatures that had been waiting centuries for fresh genetic material. Each person who disappeared had been transformed into a guardian of the gateway, tasked with luring more victims down into the depths to continue the cycle. As the creature spoke, I felt something brush against my leg, then wrap around my ankle with surprising strength. More appendages joined the first, beginning to drag me toward one of the side tunnels where I could hear the sound of something large and wet waiting in the darkness. My kicks and struggles only seemed to amuse my captors, who made sounds that might have been laughter if they had come from human throats. The knife in my hand felt warm, almost hot, and when I looked down, I was amazed to see that it was glowing with a faint blue light that pushed back the oppressive darkness. The blade's unexpected illumination revealed that I was being dragged toward what appeared to be a natural cave system that extended far beyond the original well shaft. The walls were covered with more of the organic cocoon material, but these were larger and more developed, some containing shapes that were recognizably human in their basic configuration. The glow from my knife seemed to cause the creatures pain, and they recoiled from its light while maintaining their grip on my legs. In the brief moment of clarity the light provided, I saw something that gave me hope. Carved into the stone wall near the tunnel entrance were symbols that matched ones I had seen in my grandmother's old books about folk magic and protection rituals. Without fully understanding what I was doing, I began to recite half-remembered phrases in Latin that my grandmother had taught me as a child, words she claimed could ward off evil spirits and unnatural creatures. The effect was immediate and dramatic, causing the creatures to release me with what sounded like screams of genuine anguish. The knife's glow intensified, revealing more protective symbols carved throughout the cave system, suggesting that someone else had been down here before and had attempted to contain whatever was breeding in these depths. Using the light as both weapon and guide, I began to fight my way back toward the main shaft, slashing at any creature that came too close while continuing to recite the protective incantations. The creatures followed but kept their distance, apparently unable or unwilling to approach the blessed blade directly. The climb back to the surface was a nightmare of groping for handholds in the ancient stone while fending off creatures that attacked from below with increasing desperation. Several times, clawed hands grabbed at my boots, and I had to use the knife to sever fingers and tentacles that tried to drag me back down into the depths. The protective incantations seemed to work best when spoken with genuine faith, and I found myself praying to every saint and deity I could remember from my childhood religious education. About halfway up, I discovered iron rungs embedded in the stone wall, apparently placed there by whoever had carved the protective symbols throughout the cave system. These rungs were inscribed with similar markings and seemed to repel the creatures even more effectively than my knife, creating a path of relative safety toward the surface. As I climbed higher, the creatures' pursuit became more frantic, and I could hear additional sounds suggesting that more of them were emerging from deeper parts of the cave system. The whispers had returned, but now they were angry and threatening, promising that I would never truly escape and that they would find me wherever I tried to hide. My arms ached from the climb, and several times I nearly lost my grip on the slick stone, but the thought of falling back into that nightmare pit gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. The circle of sky above grew larger and brighter, promising escape from the supernatural horrors below, but I could hear something large climbing after me, getting closer with each passing second. Breaking through the well's opening felt like being reborn, and I collapsed on the frost-covered grass, gasping in the clean night air while my mind tried to process what I had just experienced. The creatures below were still active, and I could hear them scratching and clawing at the stone walls in frustrated rage, occasionally sending up sounds that might have been attempts at human speech. Without hesitation, I began dragging the heavy wooden planks back over the well opening, working with desperate efficiency to restore the barriers that had contained these horrors for unknown years. The protective symbols on the planks now made perfect sense, and I realized that whoever had sealed this well originally had known exactly what they were dealing with. As I replaced the chains and padlocks, using additional securing materials I found in the toolshed, I could feel the creatures testing the renewed barriers, pressing against the wood with what sounded like dozens of hands and other appendages. The iron seemed particularly effective at containing them, and I made a mental note to reinforce the covering with additional metal components at the first opportunity. My knife had returned to its normal appearance, showing no sign of the supernatural glow that had saved my life, but I could feel that something fundamental had changed about it during our time in the depths. The eastern horizon was beginning to show the first hints of dawn, and I knew that the other workers would be awakening soon, giving me little time to clean up the evidence of my nocturnal adventure. The following days passed in a haze of paranoia and hypervigilance as I waited for some sign that the creatures in the well were attempting to break free or seeking revenge for my intrusion. Every sound seemed potentially threatening, and I found myself constantly checking the well's covering to ensure that all the restraints remained secure. The other workers noticed my changed behavior but attributed it to the general stress of working on the supposedly cursed property. I couldn't bring myself to tell them what I had discovered, knowing that they would either think I was insane or, worse, might be curious enough to investigate for themselves. Instead, I began researching the history of the area whenever I could get to the town library, looking for any information about the original inhabitants and the purpose of the symbols I had seen. What I found was fragmentary but disturbing, suggesting that the area had been considered sacred or taboo by multiple Native American tribes who had specifically avoided settling there. Early European settlers had reported strange disappearances and unnatural phenomena, leading to the abandonment of several homesteads in the region. The Ashton family appeared to have been the longest continuous inhabitants, lasting nearly 20 years before their mysterious departure. According to newspaper accounts, they had repeatedly contacted authorities about livestock deaths and strange noises coming from their property, but investigators had found no evidence of predators or other natural causes. The final report mentioned that the family had requested assistance in sealing an old well, claiming that it was somehow connected to their problems, but the authorities had dismissed this as superstition. My research revealed that similar wells existed throughout the region, all sharing certain characteristics including unusual depth, ancient construction techniques, and protective symbols carved into their stonework. Several had been sealed by local communities after unexplained incidents, while others had been filled with concrete or simply abandoned when surrounding properties became uninhabitable. A pattern emerged suggesting that these wells were part of a larger network, possibly created by an unknown pre-Columbian civilization for purposes that conventional archaeology couldn't explain. The symbols I had seen matched descriptions from various anthropological texts dealing with protective rituals and dimensional barriers, concepts that seemed impossibly advanced for the time periods involved. As weeks passed, I began to notice changes in myself that I couldn't attribute to normal stress or trauma. My night vision had improved dramatically, allowing me to see clearly in almost complete darkness, and I found myself understanding languages that I had never studied. The knife that had saved my life now felt warm against my skin whenever I carried it, and sometimes I could swear that it whispered warnings about approaching dangers. Most disturbing of all, I occasionally heard the voices from the well calling to me from distances that should have made them impossible to detect. They knew my name, knew details about my life that no earthly creature should possess, and promised rewards beyond imagination if I would return to complete my transformation. Fighting these compulsions became a daily struggle, requiring constant mental effort to maintain my human identity and resist the growing urge to descend once again into those cursed depths. The breaking point came on a night in late November when the first heavy snow of winter began to fall across the Kentucky landscape. I had been lying awake for hours, listening to sounds that seemed to come from beneath the frozen ground, when I heard the unmistakable sound of splintering wood from the direction of the well. Racing outside in my nightclothes, I found that the wooden covering had been torn apart from within, the heavy planks scattered across the snow like broken toys. The chains and padlocks lay twisted and melted, as if they had been subjected to incredible heat, and a warm mist was rising from the well opening. Fresh snow that fell near the well melted instantly upon contact with the ground, creating a circle of bare earth around the supernatural breach. From the depths came sounds of movement and celebration, as if the creatures were preparing for some kind of emergence or ceremony. The other workers remained in their bunks, apparently held in the same unnatural sleep I had experienced during my first encounter with the well, leaving me alone to face whatever was rising from the depths. The knife in my pocket grew almost too hot to touch, and when I drew it, the blue glow returned with greater intensity than before, causing the mist to recoil and the sounds from below to take on a note of anger and frustration. As I approached the well opening, I could see shapes moving in the darkness below, climbing steadily toward the surface with inhuman determination. These were not the same creatures I had encountered before, but something larger and more fully developed, beings that had completed their transformation and were ready to claim the surface world as their domain. The first creature to emerge was a fusion of multiple human forms, its body composed of limbs and organs that had been grotesquely rearranged and augmented with insectoid features. It moved with the confidence of an apex predator, its multiple eyes scanning the snowy landscape as if cataloging potential territory for conquest. When it saw me standing there with the glowing knife, it paused and spoke in a voice that was somehow familiar despite its inhuman resonance. It claimed to be the missing Ashton boy, transformed and evolved beyond human limitations, and it thanked me for reopening their prison by allowing them to sense human curiosity and weakness. My investigation of the well had provided them with the psychic energy needed to break through the barriers that had contained them for decades, and now they were free to resume their ancient purpose of transforming this world to match their vision of perfection. More creatures began climbing from the depths, each one representing a different stage of the transformation process, from recently converted humans who still retained some recognizable features to ancient beings that had been changing and growing for centuries. They moved with coordinated purpose, spreading out across the property as if executing a long-planned strategy for expansion. The knife in my hand pulsed with increasing heat and light, apparently responding to the proximity of so many supernatural entities, and I realized that it might be the only thing standing between these creatures and their conquest of the surrounding area. The voice of the transformed Ashton boy continued to echo in my mind even as its physical form moved away, explaining that my resistance was futile and that I had already been marked for transformation during my earlier visit to their realm. Fighting my way through the emerging creatures toward the barn where the other workers slept, I struggled to understand how the protective knife could be used to reverse what I had inadvertently started. The blade seemed to respond to focused intent and genuine desperation, its glow intensifying whenever I concentrated on protecting innocent lives and containing supernatural evil. Each creature I encountered reacted to the light with pain and retreat, but their numbers were overwhelming, and I realized that simple flight would not be sufficient to stop their spread. As I reached the barn, I found that the other workers were indeed held in an unnatural sleep, their breathing slow and synchronized as if they were all sharing the same drug-induced dream. Attempts to wake them proved futile, and I began to suspect that their minds had been somehow linked to the emerging creatures, making them potential hosts for the transformation process. The barn itself seemed to be changing, with organic growth spreading across the walls and ceiling like accelerated fungal infections. These growths pulsed with the same rhythm as the cocoons I had seen in the well, suggesting that the entire property was being converted into some kind of breeding facility. Outside, I could hear the creatures moving through the other farm buildings, their alien communications creating a symphony of clicks and whistles that seemed to coordinate their activities with military precision. The knife's heat was becoming almost unbearable, but I could feel that its power was reaching some kind of critical threshold, as if it was preparing to unleash energies that had been building since my first encounter with the supernatural entities. Desperate for answers about how to use the knife's power effectively, I remembered the protective symbols I had seen throughout the cave system and began to trace similar patterns in the air with the glowing blade. Each symbol left traces of blue fire that hung in the darkness for several seconds before fading, and I noticed that the creatures avoided these areas even after the light had dimmed. Working quickly, I began to inscribe protective barriers around the barn, creating a network of supernatural defenses that seemed to hold the creatures at bay while I tried to formulate a plan for stopping their expansion. The transformed Ashton boy appeared outside the barriers, its multiple forms shifting and changing as it studied my makeshift fortifications. It offered to spare the sleeping workers if I would surrender myself for transformation, claiming that my exposure to their realm had already begun the process and that resistance would only make the change more painful. As it spoke, I could feel the truth in its words, sensing changes in my own body and mind that marked the beginning of something irreversible. The knife's glow was now so intense that it hurt to look at directly, and I realized that it was not just a weapon but some kind of key or catalyst designed to interact with the supernatural forces I was fighting. The protective symbols around the barn were beginning to fade, their power apparently limited by my own strength and understanding, and I knew that I had only minutes before the creatures broke through and claimed their prize. The solution came to me in a flash of insight that felt like divine inspiration. The knife was not meant to fight the creatures but to seal the gateway that allowed them access to this world. Racing back toward the well while maintaining the protective barriers around my fellow workers, I began to understand the true purpose of the symbols and the knife's supernatural properties. The blade was a focus for human will and faith, designed to channel protective energies through someone willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. The original sealing of the well had required a similar sacrifice, someone who had descended into the depths and used their life force to power the barriers that had contained the creatures for decades. As I reached the well opening, the emerging creatures converged on my position, sensing that I represented a threat to their expansion plans. The transformed Ashton boy led the assault, its multiple forms attacking with coordinated fury while promising that cooperation would result in a less painful transformation. Fighting my way through the supernatural horde, I reached the edge of the well and looked down into depths that seemed to extend infinitely into other dimensions. The knife's glow revealed that the entire shaft was now lined with organic material that pulsed with alien life, transforming the simple stone well into a biological gateway between worlds. More creatures were climbing toward the surface, their forms becoming increasingly inhuman as they rose from deeper levels of the interdimensional space. Without hesitation, I jumped into the well, using the knife's power to carve protective symbols into the organic walls as I fell, each mark sealing another section of the gateway and trapping the creatures below with their own transformed essence. The impact of landing at the bottom of the well should have killed me, but the knife's power seemed to cushion the fall while simultaneously beginning the process of permanent sealing. The creatures around me writhed in apparent agony as the protective symbols I had carved began to glow throughout the cave system, their light growing brighter and more encompassing with each passing second. The transformed Ashton boy materialized beside me, its multiple forms now showing signs of deterioration as the sealing process reversed whatever had allowed these beings to exist in our reality. It begged me to stop, claiming that they were not evil but simply trying to survive and evolve in a hostile universe, but I could see the deception in its scattered eyes and feel the malevolent intelligence that drove its existence. The knife in my hand had become too bright to look at directly, and I could feel my own life force being drawn into its power, feeding the sealing process that would trap these creatures forever. As the light intensified, the organic material covering the walls began to burn away, revealing the original stone construction with its protective symbols now glowing with the same supernatural fire. The creatures' screams of rage and fear echoed through dimensions I couldn't comprehend, but I held tight to the knife and continued the sealing ritual even as I felt my human form beginning to change in response to the energies I was channeling. The last thing I remembered was the sensation of becoming one with the protective barriers, my consciousness spreading throughout the cave system to become a permanent guardian against future breaches. I awakened on the surface 3 days later, found by concerned townspeople who had noticed that no one had seen any of the farm workers for several days. The well was sealed with what appeared to be solid stone that had somehow grown from within the shaft itself, filling the entire opening with material that defied geological explanation. My fellow workers were alive but had no memory of the supernatural events, recalling only ordinary dreams of farm work and normal countryside sounds. The knife was gone, presumably consumed in the sealing process, but I could still feel its warmth in my pocket and sometimes see traces of its blue glow when danger threatened. Physical examination revealed that I had suffered no serious injuries from my ordeal, but I knew that I had been fundamentally changed by my experience in the depths. Over the following weeks, I discovered that I could sense other supernatural gateways and entities, as if my sacrifice had made me a permanent guardian against such threats. The Ashton farm was eventually abandoned again, with the sealed well becoming a local landmark that people avoided without understanding why. I never returned to Kentucky, but I often dream of that cursed place and wake with the certainty that the creatures are still down there, trapped but not destroyed, waiting for someone else to weaken the barriers I helped create. 40 years have passed since that terrible night at Ashton Farm, but the memory remains as vivid as if it happened yesterday. The supernatural sensitivity I gained from my experience has led me to similar sites across the country, places where the barriers between worlds have worn thin and ancient horrors wait for opportunities to emerge. Each sealed gateway requires constant vigilance, and I have dedicated my life to maintaining the protective barriers that keep our world safe from interdimensional predators. The knife never returned to me physically, but I can still feel its presence during moments of greatest danger, providing the strength and guidance needed to face supernatural threats. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice that night, whether sealing the gateway was worth the price I paid in human normalcy and peace of mind. But then I remember the creature's plans for transforming our world into something that would serve their alien purposes, and I know that any sacrifice was justified to prevent such a fate. The scars on my mind continue to bleed decades later, but they serve as a reminder that some battles must be fought regardless of personal cost. If you've enjoyed this true account of what happened at Ashton Farm, please check out my other stories about encounters with the supernatural forces that threaten our reality.